at the moment. If anybody can see me, I think we're on. Yes, it looks as though we are. And it took more than a minute for the thing to actually connect. I'm not in the middle of nowhere, as I have been in previous when I've tried doing it in the past. And today I'm in the centre of the town. I'm exactly the same place I was in yesterday, and I'm going to tell a story very similar to that of yesterday. And so as always, if you've got any questions, write them down. I'll answer. I'll answer them at the end. Hello, Craig, and Mike as well. And today I'm going to talk to you about. It's actually, it's a bit like in some ways, it's a bit like something of a gossip column. This, and but it's quite a good story, which would make a very good film, in my opinion. But let's start off by looking at how not just the Nazis come to power, but all sorts of other regimes. And it's not just those on the extreme right, although I don't believe in sort of saying right wing and left wing, because these things don't make any sense any longer. They've lost their meaning. So I look at something being either progressive or regressive. And regressive would include both the extreme right and the extreme left. So but the way they come to power is by the use of violence. So if you take Hitler, you've got these people on the streets, the SA, beating people up, attacking people, destroying things. And the idea wasn't original because it was done in Italy beforehand. This is what the fascists did there. You'll see the same thing actually being done in Spain with Franco's lot. And in other dictatorships in Europe, for example, in Romania, they had their thugs going around doing similar things. But it's not even just Europe. I mean, if we take, for example, Haiti, which is there was a Tonton Macoute, or maybe they were paramilitaries of the regime. But anyway, they have people who go around beating others up. Equatorial Guinea today, there's an example. Who are, or even Iran has these what do you call them, religious police and things. Although again, they're sort of within the state. Now the thing is, these thugs, once they brought their party to power, then they get official roles, and that is what we're going to sort of talk about today. It's the use of these violent people in an official role, and then what can happen. And so, if you remember yesterday, there was a stone which tried to assassinate Himmler, or so he claimed, whilst he was going to the burial of Goering's wife. And this story is about the person, one of the people, who got blamed for that stone that hit him. So Karl Belding was this person. He was a violent thug. And so he would have thought nothing about killing what he considered to be the enemies of what he considered to be his state. He was born on the 12th of April 1897 in Fahrland, which is Potsdam. Aged only, went to sea in the Imperial German Navy as a cabin boy, and as such he got to as far as a chief petty officer, which, quite honest, isn't bad considering his age. And he may well have witnessed the revolution which took place in November 1918, and it may have disgusted him. But then again, he was totally outnumbered, because in this case the violence would have been directed at the likes of him, who probably was in favor of the Kaiser's regime. Now, when the war ended, like many people in his position, he was demobilized, and like many people, if he had no job to go back to, nothing else to do, no family to go to, and he wanted to have some form of an income, he could join one of the paramilitary organizations. And what he joined was the Grenzschutz Ost, Grenz means border, Schutz means protection, Ost means east, the eastern border protection. And that sounds as though it's something which is a real organization of the state, but it wasn't. It was a group of various thugs who decided that they didn't want the borders to change. And so they're just sort of volunteers, but somehow they would have been arranged for food and all the rest of it. Now, in their case, what they wanted to protect the border from was from being border being given to the new state of Poland. So they would have gone around attacking Polish speakers, particularly those, for example, in the Poznań region or in Upper Silesia. And later, when Poland itself was independent, and but it was fighting a war against the Soviet, what was to become the Soviet Union, Soviet Russia. It was this was seen as a threat. Indeed, it possibly was a threat. So, having said that, once the Treaty of Versailles was signed in 1919, and this sort of began to get wound down, and some of these people may have tried to get into the Provisional Army, but there was a lack of space, lack of opportunities in the Provisional Army. And now the army, one thing about the army is it feeds people, and so at least you've got a roof over your head and you've got food in your stomach. So that was something which was pretty good about joining the army. And so in the case of Belding, he made a move, however, to the police force. So he was quite lucky that he could get in there, and he got to a rank of Unterwachtmeister, and he was discharged from the army in 1923. I suspect he was discharged for reasons of cost, not for bad behaviour. From 1923 to 28, he got a job as a bouncer, a doorman, and he worked as an inspector in a private company. He lost his job in 1928, and which led to then a long period of unemployment. Now, this is just before the crash came along. He got employment in September 29, just as the crash was coming along, as a chauffeur, and he stayed there driving people around until power was surrendered to Adolf Hitler in January 1933. And then he was sorry. Right, good. So sorry, I think the connection go down from time to time. So Belding is one of these characters who had been involved in extreme right-wing politics. Probably at the time he was in the Grenzschutz, and the police is noted for not being particularly for being particularly right-wing as well. And so the Grenzschutz Ost would have been people extreme right-wing nationalist views, and by the middle of the 20s, he belonged to the Berlin branch of the Frontbahn. That was an organization set up by Ernst Röhm as a replacement for the paramilitary organizations of the Völkisch Right. The word Völkisch is very difficult to translate into English, which is why I don't. It's usually translated as folk, but in fact what it means is some kind of belief in the power, like as in Russia today, for example. It's a Völkisch state, believes in the power of the earth, gives birth to a superior type of people who then should be dominating on others because their civilization is better, and all the rest of it. So this is a Nazism as a Völkisch organization, Völkisch type organization, as was Italian fascism, and as is Russia today, for example, all Völkisch. Anyway, so the Ernst Röhm had set up a section of the Frontbahn in northern Germany, and for this he entrusted a man who was said to be his homosexual lover, and his name was Paul Oscar Röbein. This unit was called the Frontbahn Nord, and Röbein was known in extreme right-wing circles as being the official representative of Ludendorff in Berlin. Röbein recruited members of Frontbahn Nord from the German Gymnastics Association, the Viking League, the Black Reichswehr, and the Border Building. That's where he met him. Chose Karl Ernst, to later head of the SA in Berlin Brandenburg, as his adjutant. Now, Ernst was also said to have had a homosexual relationship with Röbein, and he got the nickname of Frau Röbein, or for those who were a bit more polite towards him, they could call him Frau von Röbein. Now, the Nazi Party was banned as a result of the beer hall putsch in November 1923, but by 1925 the ban was lifted. As a result, Belding was able to join the Nazi Party 9th of April 1926, and he also became a member of the Sturmabteilung, the SA, the thugs that went around the streets beating people up. In 1931, he got as far as commanding a Berlin SA Standard, and he reached the rank of SA Standartenführer by 1932 at the very latest, and probably earlier. Now that's a very high rank, and I do realise that at this time they're still sort of playing soldiers, but we have to remember that there were hundreds of thousands of people in the SA, and Standartenführer is effectively a colonel. Or lieutenant colonel anyway. So it's an army rank. So it suggests to me that he must have been quite good at his job, which of course was throwing violence, beating people up and the rest of it. Now, for street fighting thugs like Belding, the Nazis being granted power by the wealthy conservatives ushered in a time where they could use violence to their heart's content without having to worry about the law. Of course, it wasn't much fun for the victims. The style of terrorism in order to seize power, of course, is not unusual, as I said earlier. Now, just after Hitler got power, Belding was placed at the special disposal of the SA Motor Brigade, Berlin-Brandenburg. Soon, Belding's reputation as a vicious thug meant that Karl Ernst, who was then the Gruppenführer of the SA in Berlin-Brandenburg, suggested him to the SS leader of Berlin, Kurt Daluege, and placed him at his disposal. Thus, Belding became a detective with the Gestapo in Berlin. Daluege, Ernst and Belding had known each other at least since their days together in the front band. So he's now a police detective, and his qualifications are that he's a criminal, a street thug who goes on beating people up. Or who went around beating people up. He probably stopped it when he became a policeman. In 1924, Helmut Unger was a 15-year-old member of the Bismarck League, the youth wing of the nationalist DVNP political party, the German National People's Party. Around this time, Karl Belding befriended him, despite the Nord. The young a number of other people there who were to play an important role in the future Nazi party, such as Paul Röbein, Karl Ernst, and Kurt Daluege. After dissolution of the front band in 1926, Unger remained active in the nationalist movement. He was active in the Spandau SA and the newly founded Nazi Party, or refounded Nazi Party, although he didn't actually join it. He did, however, go to the first Nazi Party Congress, which was held in Weimar in 1927, and he joined the party on the 1st of May 1930. In the spring of 1931, at the instigation of his old friend Karl Ernst, who had since risen to the position of adjutant to the Berlin SA leadership, Unger was appointed staff commander of the 1st Berlin SA Standarte, which was then, of course, commanded by Karl Belding. He initially held the rank of SA Sturmführer, rising to Standartenstabsführer, and which in later years was the SA Sturmführer. However, his Nazi party activities didn't leave much time for getting a proper job, which is the problem of doing politics and not doing a job for a living. He was very short of cash. In the summer of 1931, he was approached by the Department of the sorry, it was Department 1A, the political police of the Berlin police headquarters, and they recruited him as an informant. So he was giving information about the Nazis. He subsequently wrote regular reports for the police on internal proceedings and the plans of the Berlin SA and Nazi Party, spying on his mates. In the autumn of 1931, the SA discovered that Unger was a registered member of the Communist Party of Germany, KPD. When questioned about this, he explained that he joined the Communist Party in 1930 at the instigation of the then Berlin SA chief Walter Stennis in order to spy on the communists for the benefit of the Nazi Party. Despite the growing distrust of him at the time, Unger was allowed to attend a course at the Nazi Party's Reichsführer school in Munich in September 1931, and there's a photograph of that, and I think he's in the photograph, although I don't know which one he actually is. I'm going to talk about the photograph in a different video. After his return from Munich, Unger was suspended from the SA October 1931 and relegated to a subordinate position at the staff of Squadron 1. 4 weeks later, he was also excluded from staff service. In 1932 and the spring of 1933, he tried unsuccessfully to rejoin the SA, but he was rejected as being untrustworthy. However, his friend Karl Ernst didn't forget him. When power was surrendered to Hitler on the 30th of January 1933, Unger was allowed to participate in the torchlit procession through the Brandenburg Gate. Thus, he could celebrate Hitler's appointment as Reich Chancellor on the night of the 30th of 31st. And one of those at this procession was Hans Maikowski, who deviated from the route once the march concluded by leading his Sturm 33 through Waldstrasse in Charlottenburg, a street known to be a communist stronghold. There, a shootout ensued, which is probably what they did it for, in which police officer Josef Zauritz was shot and killed, and Maikowski was gravely wounded, and he succumbed to his wounds at West End Hospital. Maikowski and Unger had been friends, and Unger was allowed to attend the memorial service in Berlin Cathedral, and Maikowski became, I think, fair enough to say, he was the first martyr of the Nazis following their appointment to power. So when the Nazis got control of the police, thanks to the machinations of the conservatives of Hitler, they also got the access to the files of the political police. And as a result, they discovered that Unger had provided information not only to the political police, but also to the Social Democratic Party, the SPD. Now, based on this, Karl Belding and Bernhard Fischer-Schweder detained Helmut Unger on the 24th of June 1933 and took him to the Horst Wessel house, which was being used by the Gestapo. During his interrogation there by Detective Inspector Rudolf Braschwitz, after initially denying the allegations, he had finally admitted that he had indeed worked as an informant, a paid informant, in 1931-1932. According to Braschwitz's later statements, he suffered a nervous breakdown after the confession. He declared that he regretted his behaviour and called himself a swine. Of course, Unger had not committed a crime. Indeed, in providing information to the police, he'd only done what any honest citizen should have done. However, once he'd confessed, as he hadn't done anything wrong under the law, he was allowed to go, but only as far as the corridor. As far as the Nazi Party was concerned, he was very guilty, but that of party misconduct. However, the Nazis, of course, only cared about his role in the party. They didn't care about what the law was and really know what happened to him. But I don't think he got out. He got further in the corridor. He was picked up by these two, Belding and Bernhard Fischer-Schweder, and they took away Unger. Despite Unger being his friend, Belding was involved in his murder, and presumably they shot him somewhere. His body was never turned up. Now, anyway, shortly after, the result, of course, could be guessed at, because they tried the public prosecutor's office, and at the Prussian State Ministry, the public prosecutor was still independent, but he was unwilling to risk doing anything that might upset the wrath and the thuggery of the Nazis. On that subject, I should point out I did a video on the Munich public prosecutor who attempted to investigate murders committed at Dachau. Unger's parents learned that Belding and Fischer Schweder had likely killed their son. Probably they realized these two had picked him up. They probably heard from somebody at the Horst Wessel house, and they demanded that the authorities take action against the suspected perpetrators. So this matter came as far as Rudolf Diels, who was then head of the Gestapo, and he went down to see the Ungers and explained to the couple that if Belding and Fischer Schweder had indeed committed the crime, they ought to just get over it. Of course, they didn't want to, and the matter had got as far as the Reich Chancery, the Chancery ordered Diels to prepare a report on the incident. So, in view of this, the best thing to do is to get Belding and Fischer Schweder moved out of Berlin, so they're sent off to the Gestapo at Breslau as from the 1st of June. At the same time, Belding was also transferred from the Berlin Brandenburg Motor Brigade to the staff of the SA Obergruppe 8. Now, what we know also is that, which I talked about yesterday, was the attempted assassination of Himmler. What was probably happened, of course, was when Himmler and Hitler and their mates all went off to see Goering's place in the middle of June 1934 for the reburial of Goering's first wife, Karen Goering, that a stone was probably thrown up by one of the cars traveling at over 100 kilometers an hour on these country roads, and broke the window of Himmler's car. Now Himmler, being a bit of a coward and a conspiracist, automatically therefore assumed it was an attempt to kill him, and so therefore he had to take action against it. This also, with a few days later, we have what was called the Night of the Long Knives, 30th of June 1934. Hitler moved against the leaders of the SA, the very people whose thuggery and violence had brought him to power. And so on that day, Ernst Röhm and the other SA leaders who'd gathered at Tegernsee in Bavaria were arrested, and many of them were murdered. And the murder campaign was based on internal Nazi ideological differences, these power tensions between the SA and parts of the Nazi party. Hitler sided with what might be called the conservatives. He didn't want to have the more SA for doing a second revolution where they would grab power for themselves. So if you like, it was the SA was more, I think, was sort of close. As much as I don't like saying left and right wing, so Hitler was on the right and the SA was on the left. Maybe that was one way of putting it. Of course, Ernst Röhm, when he went down to Tegernsee, it was a night out for the boys. In fact, it was Hitler, in fact, who had ordered them to go to Tegernsee, and not all high-ranking SA men were there. And now, for example, is a very curious story. Belding's friend from way back, Karl Ernst, who I mentioned earlier, had made his way on the 29th of June 1934 to Bremen, the port. Now, Ernst was apparently the former homosexual lover, Ernst Röhm, and Ernst obviously wasn't too bothered what sex their partners were, so he married the 29-year-old Minna Wolf on the 17th of September 1933 in Berlin. And not only that, Röhm had turned up at his wedding, so it clearly didn't bother him that his former boyfriend was getting married. Goering was also there at the wedding. So his plan, Karl Ernst's plan, was to go from Bremerhaven on a North German Lloyd ship to Madeira, where he intended to spend his delayed honeymoon. Now, as he was about to board the ship to Bremerhaven, at noon. So you get a ship at Bremen to take them to Bremerhaven, and then at Bremerhaven you get a bigger ship to sail off to Madeira. So he's about to get on the ship at Bremerhaven at noon at 30th of June 1934, together with his bride and his friend Martin Kirschbaum, who had financed the passage. He was arrested on the basis of an arrest warrant received from Berlin. He was handed over to an SS commando led by Kurt Gildish, who had arrived from Berlin on a special plane and who also flew him back to Berlin. After arriving at Tempelhof Airport, he was taken to the SS barracks in Berlin-Lichterfelde, where he was shot by members of the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler. Now, I always say that getting shot is not a good way to start your honeymoon. Anyway, now it states the time of death at 07, that's to say long before he even knew he was going to get shot that day. So the problem was, though, that his execution had been announced on the radio several hours earlier. They thought they'd catch him at home. Then didn't realize he was going off on his honeymoon, and so they failed to get him where he was supposed to be. Now, since Ernst believed until the end that he was a victim of an unfortunate mistake, he died shouting Heil Hitler. Now, on that same day, on the 30th of June 1934, Goering sent a message to SS Oberabschnittsführer Südost Udo von Wöhrisch, stating that significant sections of the SA under Chief of Staff Ernst Röhm had made preparations for coup d'etat, and he ordered the arrest of a number of people associated with the SA in Breslau. This included Karl Belding, Herbert Ender, Reinhold Nixdorf, Edmund Heines, Oskar Heines, Hans Ramshorn, Eberhard von Weckmar, and Ludwig Engels. Around the time that Ernst was being taken to the SS barracks in Berlin-Lichterfelde, 300 kilometers to the southeast, Belding and Fischer-Schwede turned up for work. Whether or not they knew anything about the Röhm business is, of course, not known. Maybe they heard something on the radio, but then again, I don't think cars had radios in them in those days, and they probably take the car anyway. So on arrival that day at the Breslau police headquarters, they were greeted by the SS men who had been given executive power in Breslau on orders from Berlin the previous night. The SS had taken control of the police headquarters. Belding and Fischer-Schwede were taken into custody by the SS, locked in the police headquarters in-house prison. They were joined by several dozen more SA members and sort of hung around there during the day. Now, during the day, a bit later, a telegram from Himmler arrived. It ordered the execution of the detained, or some of the detained SA men, and under the command of SS Obersturmbannführer Friedrich Schlums, commander of the 16th SS Standarte Unterelbe, Kurt Engelhardt, Karl Lipinski, Otto Stucken, Reinhold Nixdorf, Eberhard von Weckmar, and Karl Belding were taken to a forest near Oborniki Śląski, then called Obernik, which is 15 kilometers to the north of the center of Breslau. I forgot the name of it yesterday, but I remember. And there they were murdered by a firing squad commanded by SS Sturmführer Fritz Mohr. And the death certificate listed the time of the shootings as 2 to 3 in the morning of the 1st of July 1934. The bodies were buried where they were shot, but they were later exhumed and cremated in Breslau. On the 3rd of July 1934, Hitler cabinet approved the law on the measures of state emergency defense with the following wording: the measures were taken to suppress high treason and treasonous attacks on the 30th of June and the 1st and 2nd of July 1934 are legal as state emergency defense. You see, he used to make something legal. Now, a few weeks later, Belding's widow, Gertrude, received some keys and an empty wallet from the Gestapo. The Gestapo had obviously helped themselves to whatever was in his wallet. However, Karl Belding's legal problems were not yet over, even though he was dead. In 1935, an investigation was launched against him and a friend of his called Ottmar Teufel, for the physical assault on a foreign consul. And Teufel, that's it. Teufel was another one of the SA sadists who was shot during the night of the Long Knives. On the 21st of April 1956, a public prosecutor in West Germany filed an indictment which led to a criminal case for these murders being opened. As a result, Udo von Voysch was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment on the 2nd of August 1957 for aiding and abetting manslaughter in 6 cases, whilst his co-defendant, Ernst Müller-Altenau, was acquitted due to lack of evidence. Von Voysch, however, was released in 1960. So, that is the story of Karl Belding and his being one of those who was shot for attempting to kill Himmler. I think the fact that the other one was actually released, I think that shows that they clearly didn't actually believe it. That's the case. Fischer-Schweder went on to lead or be involved in the Einsatzkommando Tilsit. Okay, right. So, okay, right. See, no questions. I'm sorry, the internet connection here was really bad. Today I put it up as well, so I can actually see myself on the internet, and yeah, it's not very good. So it's a pity, really, because I think that's quite a good story. Okay, well, that's it for today. I'm not certain if I'll do one or not tomorrow. I may do. Well, I'll see about that tomorrow. But for the moment, thanks for being here. Thanks for watching, and all the best for me. So bye for now.